What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. So glad to have you all here. Today we're gonna have a conversation about superstition and cooperation. And these are some fairly scattered notes, so hopefully we'll be able to pull some value out of this. But it's something that I've been thinking of for the past week or so, and I really wanted to share it. Now, I will warn you in advance, I'm a little low energy today, so please bear with me. Now, if you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider volunteering or joining our community through YouTube membership program, Patreon, or even on the Discord. And we also have merch. Check out our merch. It's some of the dopest out there, if I can say so myself. So let's kind of jump into this conversation to kind of create or to provide some type of caveat to this. I want to open it, and for those of you who've been around my channel for a while, what I'm about to say now shouldn't be shocking for you. So this is somewhat of a refresher, so that we can have this conversation, or more aptly, so that I can kind of have this monologue for a moment. But I like to remind people that religions did not make us superstitious. I think this is something that needs to be highlighted when having conversations like this, so we can actually understand where the work needs to be done, where the blame may be, which I don't actually like using the word blame, or more aptly, where the responsibility lies. Right. So I need us to understand that religions did not make us superstitious. And watch this, spoiler alert, nor did gods give us religions. Um, and you'll see where I'm going. Our superstitions were initially likely the result of our understandable misunderstandings of a world that we are still just beginning to understand, right? So, even with knowing where we are today and all of the advancements that we've made as a species, there is still so much that we do not know. There's still so much that we do not understand. Now, flashback, let's go back maybe 80,000, 50,000, 40,000, 20,000 years ago. We would have known even less. However, we would have had some understandable misunderstandings, as we likely still have today, based off of our observations of the world. These misunderstandings were codified into cultural memes that evolved into religions, then adapting divine authority figures to ensure adherence to what is often called the way, because that's ultimately where this kind of leads to. As humans, we realize that there are ways to do things, ways to make things, and even ways to make things happen. Initially, somewhere along the way, we assumed agency within these processes. So I was kind to the ground, therefore the ground has been kind to me, type of thing. Good juju, bad juju. Over time, as we grew to understand more about the world that we lived in, we realized we were observing processes and not agency. However, instead of correcting the initial assumption of agency, which of course we likely wouldn't have even known to do yet, we pushed the idea or the assignment of agency further out, leading to the belief that someone or something must have paved the way for these processes to exist. Now, again, this is me just kind of giving some backdrop to really properly elevate this conversation, right? So this is, and of course, I go into this in a little bit more detail in one of my earlier videos and called "How Why Atheism is Spreading Like Wildfire." But you see that adoptment. So, and the reason I say this, because we think that, oh, religions made us superstitious, and as long as we think that, we'll think people who are not religious are not superstitious, or we'll think that, oh, God gave us religions, and as long as we think that, we'll think people who don't believe in God are not religious. And I don't know if you've noticed, this is one of the reasons why I like for us to be careful about just using labels to get to shortcuts in our understanding, because oftentimes one of these things do not look like the other. So it is a very common belief that religion and gods go hand in hand, that nothing could be further from the truth. The only way for that to be established as a truth, because of course what religion is would not be predefined, it'd have to be defined in practice. So which means we could only define it based off what we've seen practiced. And based off what we've seen practiced, there are a handful of religions that do not have a deity, that do not have any type of angels, demons, gods, or the like. Which therefore means if this is the practice, then no, religion is not synonymous with God. All right, that's another little rabbit trail, but I hope it gives you something to chew on. But then even beyond that, it's this idea. If you believe that, okay, which I know most of us don't believe that, but we do behave this way. We believe that, or behave that religions came from God and superstitions came from God, and by doing that, we remove ourselves from being the active agent to change or adjust this issue. Which was even when I was deconverting, many others who were deconverting were like, oh, religion is this, religion is that, religion is this. I don't know if you've noticed, but that's not the verbiage I use. I don't use the idea that religion is anything. It is a tool. It is a tool created by people. It's not a tool that exists in a vacuum. It did not fall out of the sky and fall onto us. So if we want to if we want to find out where the responsibility lies for anything that religion does, the responsibility should lie with people. In the same way in politics, and similar thing bothers me about politics as well, how that we can just use these labels, and when we use these labels, we for whatever reason misappropriate our own responsibility to make a difference, make an impact, and invest in the outcome. That's just me. But um as we begin to learn these processes, and as we begin to kind of move that agency out, this kind of led to a belief that there is but one way, the one way. And this is really where we kind of are jumping into the meat of this conversation. This idea that everyone must conform to, that there's this one way that everybody must conform to or comply with in order to achieve success or fulfillment or even just socially good standing. This belief is at the root of many, if not all, superstitions. The belief that there is one way, that there is a pre designed or pre approved way that everyone must comply with in order to reach their goals. And typically in these cases, it's not their goals, but because when there is the way, your goals are not necessary. Your goals are not considered because your goals then must conform with the pre-designed or pre-approved way. I highlight this root cause because it positions us to discuss how the idea of there being one way has seeded itself into our notions of cooperation. This is what often makes it very difficult for us to cooperate sometimes, is because there is this ideology of my way. You know what I'm about to say, right? Or the highway. That's still a part of that superstitious ideology that there is only one way, a way that has been predefined or pre-designed and pre-approved. So in places where this type of superstition still reigns supreme in social expectations, compliance is high and cooperation is low. Compliance centered individuals become direction dependent, always waiting for instructions because they lack both confidence and competence in their own abilities to figure things out. Now, obviously, these are things just from my observations. You may have observed something differently, and I'd encourage you to share them on your channel, not in the comments. No, maybe in the comments if you're nice. If you're not nice, share it on your channel. I won't stop you from doing that. But no, In places where this type of superstition is still prevalent, you're going to find this. In my observation, where there's this high superstition, there is high compliance, low cooperation. High, I need to follow the rules. And when I say high compliance, I'm not even saying everybody's following the rules. I'm saying that's the narrative, that's the propaganda, that's the language, that's the reason, that's the consequence. Anytime something doesn't happen right, it's because you didn't comply. Anytime something does not amount to what you want it to amount to, it's you must not have followed the rules. This is what I call compliance centered thinking, where your whole ideology is based off of, watch where we're going back to, that there is a way, and I somehow did not fit that way, this one way. This mindset actually robs people of both the opportunity and the audacity of agency, both of which are necessary for cooperation to take place. Do you see how this is connected now? Because even if you try to get a group of people together to work together, if none of them have the onus on them to say, I'm willing to try to figure this out, if all of them are compliance centered, then all of them will be waiting on both permission and instruction for anything to happen, which we often do see this happen in communities that are highly superstitious, which just so happens to also be communities that are highly impoverished. Part of that, a part of that is the inability to cooperate. Because if I don't trust my own ability, my own capacity to figure things out, how likely am I to be able to trust the capacities of others who are in the same type of environment that I am in? Not very likely. This makes cooperation very, very difficult. Nothing gets done if everyone is waiting for someone else to tell them what to do or how to do, or because they don't feel competent enough to take initiative or even make mistakes. That brings us right back to this idea. If there is the one way, then there is also this fear that if I do not do it the one way, that I am going to make a grave error from the side of point of religious superstition that God may not forgive me for, or that God may punish me for, or that the devil may take advantage of. But even from the side of social and cultural superstitions, if I mess this up, I may no longer be accepted by my in group. If I make a mistake, people may see that mistake and hold it over me for the rest of my life. All of these things make it more comfortable to comply because of the preceding idea that there is a one way. Okay. So, compliance centered communities become places where people severely mistrust their own capacity to figure things out. And it leads to stagnation and a lack of innovation where it is sorely needed. Religious thinking often leads to this compliance centered mindset, but it's not the only thing that does that. This impacts various aspects of life, such as marriage, work, education, and even parenting. That, whether you're the parent or the child, whether you're the husband, the wife, or the husband, the wife, or other things, whether it's on your job, how many people are working a job from a compliance mindset as opposed to a cooperative mindset? One of the things that I kind of pride myself on, I've done this ever since I was a young lad, as some might say, but I don't work for anybody. And I've always been like this. People called it me being arrogant. I remember one time I was working someone, and someone came up and asked me, hey, can I speak to your manager? And they didn't say it that nicely, but I was just like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a manager. I manage me. This store has a manager. Would you like to speak to the store manager? Now, I know that's kind of nitpicky, but I do that because I live by this principle that I work with people, not for people. Even if I'm working in a what some may call a lower position, or a lower designation, I still don't work for you. I am working with you at my own will. There's at will for you is at will for me too, and I am here to cooperate in my best interest, and I hope you're here to do the same. You know, But that was something that kind of put people off a lot. What do you mean? Like, cooperate? Yeah, because compliance, and we've seen how compliance can go incredibly wrong when we have these ideas of blind compliance. But what it really robs people of is understanding the whys, the hows, the whats, the whos, the whens, the wheres. And in all of my getting, I do like to get understanding. So compliance is often difficult for me. As a matter of fact, you won't get compliance from me unless you have understanding from me in most cases. But the beautiful thing is that you don't want compliance from me. That's the most least valuable response from me that you can get. You get the most value from me from my cooperation, not my compliance. Um, but I do want you to think about that. How many people are in marriages or in relationships who are who are waiting to be told what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, how they should live because they've become so compliance centered. You do some quick searches on what some top Google searches are, and it's things like how to be a good such and such. In other words, I need somebody to tell me how to do this, right? And that's because we've become increasingly more and more uncomfortable with observing the world around us and making value judgments. And again, that goes back to this idea that there is a pre-designed or pre-approved way, and that I may accidentally deviate from that. I think I've driven this point home a little bit. The big point is here, you have the capacity to cooperate. You have the capacity to figure things out and even mess things up. And many times it's the messing things up that leads to the figuring things out. And so it's not that we have to learn how to trust ourselves to the place where we believe that we're going to be perfect in every decision that we make. We have to remove ourselves from the idea of perfection, because perfection only exists in the context of a pre-designed, pre-approved one way. And if that pre-designed, pre-approved one way does not exist, then there is no such thing as perfection. Perfection is an illusion. It is all learning, you know. And that's what you will find out is that or at least that's what I've observed, is that when it does come to these issues of where this compliance centered mindset seems to dominate, it is definitely a fear of doing the wrong thing, a fear of deviating. And I want to do everything I can to help people get away from that fear, because it's the doing things, it's the messing things up that leads to the figuring things out. So, but it's not just the compliance. That there's another aspect that I want to hit as well, and I hope I hope the compliance thing has brought some value, but also in places where superstition reigns supreme, discipline often equals punishment. You know, so when we think about discipline, we often think of it as equivalent with punishment. And again, I open this with this caveat to remind us that even those who have separated from religion, even those who maybe not have never been a part of a religion, still deal with some of these type of superstitious hangups. Because again, our religions didn't make us superstitious. We codified our superstitions in religion. We were already the superstitious ones, which, in my opinion, is probably the natural state of consciousness entering the world, is going to be superstitious. You're going to create shortcuts um, to understand, because it's a lot to understand, you know? But the problem is when you codify that, and then you make it unquestionable, then you lock your people, or a group of people, all groups of people, everybody who's an adherent to that, you lock them into the misunderstandings of the past. That's no longer necessary, in my humble opinion. Um, but yeah, discipline becomes equated with punishment, or punishment becomes equated with discipline. Just kind of going back to the religious superstition ideology that, spoil the child, spare the rod, spoil the child. This is something that I've heard my whole life, which was ultimately means you have to physically beat children in order for them to be good children. If you do not physically beat them, they will not be good children. Thus saith the Lord, blessed be he, type of stuff. But in all actuality, what I've realized, especially after deconverting, is that discipline should not be about punishment at all. That's not what discipline is. When an athlete disciplines themselves, they're not punishing themselves. You know, When a person is disciplining their diet for nutritious reasons, they're not punishing themselves. These things are not equivalent, um, nor should they have ever been. Discipline should not be about complying with the rules. Discipline should be about goal alignment. And I'll kind of walk this through, to kind of get to give some idea to this. Many religion-based child rehab facilities, by the way, in the United States, most child rehab facilities are religion-based. In the majority of these facilities, they see discipline as synonymous with punishment. So it means that the way that I help you become a more disciplined person is to punish you. And I want us to understand that we didn't just get this from the Christian religion, even though Christian religion does promote this. But I often remind people, even in West African cultures that were separated from Christian religions for a long time, had similar traditional African religions had similar or spiritual systems had similar things where there was this practice where if someone did something wrong, it was the responsibility of the village to shame those people into not doing it again. you know this is that same type of connotation that punishment is equivalent with discipline. By making you feel bad, I am disciplining you. That is a to me That's a severe misunderstanding of what discipline actually means. And this results in a failure of distinguishing between telling and teaching, and training and learning, as these facilities emphasize compliance over understanding and growth. And so now, do you see how compliance and punishment go hand in hand? And can you also see how both of these would be hindrance to actual cooperation? Whether in the workplace, community, romantic relationships, or parenting, the aim should be goal alignment rather than mere compliance. And so, even when we're disciplining our children or disciplining each other, however it goes, and really is the thing is that might be the problematic part, is us thinking we're disciplining somebody else. That's really not how that goes. People have to discipline themselves. Discipline is a practice of self. It's a self practice. And so by punishing people, we're not doing anything to actually help them get the tools of discipline and learn how to use those tools. And of course, we've seen this in our jails. We've seen this in our school systems. We've seen this in these rehab systems, where the goal becomes punishment, shame, guilt. And hopefully, if you feel bad enough after all of that, you won't do these things again. The problem is we're not actually helping you explore your goals in life and how to achieve them and where to get there, because literally that's what leads to discipline. What leads to discipline is me realizing that this form of behavior is not going to get me what I want. And so a much healthier approach, after realizing that there is not one way to live, there is not one way to be, nor is there one list of rules to follow, but really beginning to help people say, okay, well, what are your goals? Because we have to understand that we, especially in this country, because of a lot of our superstitions, we created several generations of compliance centered mindseted folks. I messed that word up, but it works. But we did that, and because of that, there are several people out here who don't know how to explore themselves. They don't even know how to choose goals for themselves. You know, and this is the work that we've been done. This is the work that needs to be done. It's one thing to for us to recognize that religion has been harmful and say we want to do something about it. But when we do that, what we're saying is that, things that harm humans, we want to do something about. And so whether it's just our superstitious, whether it's just our religious superstitions or our social superstitions or any other thing we're doing, we should be, in my opinion, invested in figuring out, is this helpful? And so I wanted to kind of lift this conversation for that very reason. Because in these situations, can we see that if we continue to equate ideas, if we continue to promote compliance over cooperation, or equate discipline with punishment, do we not see how we're creating treatment that actually becomes abuse, which leads to a cycle of punishment rather than growth, and rather than cooperation? So again, I said these notes were a little scattered, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. The belief in a singular pre-approved way has deeply affected our approach to the way we work with each other, and that goes beyond just our religions. It's this idea of the one way. You have to do it my way. To be honest, I've sat in a few meetings that I was, to use a former church word, deeply grieved by. Deeply grieved by. So much so, I almost decided not to participate in what was going forward, because I don't, I'm vehemently anti-superstition. But I'm not anti-superstition just for the sake of being anti-superstition. I'm anti-superstition because I'm pro-progress. And so, not to give too many details, I remember sitting in a meeting where someone was telling someone all of the reasons that something would work. And their idea was because this is the way that it has to be done. And of course, that was further exasperated by a shameless appeal to authority. This is what I do. I know these things. Is what the person said. Um, and my problem with that is the reason why I say it's superstitious is obviously because here it's no, there's one way to do things. And if you do things any other way than this one way, then they won't work. The reason I was so grieved about this person saying that is what this person is doing isn't working. You know? So we don't judge outcomes by results that we don't have. you know and so, but I highlighted that to highlight it's foolish of us to think that religion is the only place that we have logical fallacies you know and so I hope by identifying these issues with compliance and these issues with discipline that we see how ultimately what superstitions really impact are our ability to appreciate each other, learn from each other, value each other, and ultimately cooperate with each other. That's all I have for this one. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit all of the buttons that you need to hit, and join everything that you need to join. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this, well, about half an hour. I really do appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. And until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful if you can. I'll holla.